Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the Teen Titans as their strongest member. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain was a cold, constant hiss against the broken skeleton of the city. It fell in relentless sheets, washing the gray ash from shattered concrete and pooling in the craters that pocked the streets like open sores. Each drop that struck Izuku Midoriya's exposed skin felt like a needle of ice, a stark contrast to the fire burning in his muscles and the deep, throbbing ache that had become his constant companion. He stood hunched atop a listing skyscraper, the tattered remnants of his cowl clinging to his head, its once cheerful rabbit-ear appendages now torn and drooping. His costume, a patchwork of emergency repairs and grim necessity, was more armor than uniform, stained with grime and something darker he refused to name. Below him, the district was a graveyard of ambition, a testament to the war that had consumed his world. Just one more, he thought, the words a familiar, desperate mantra. Find him. Stop him. Save them. His danger sense, a low, persistent thrum at the base of his skull, had been screaming for 72 hours straight. It had dulled from a sharp alarm to a chronic migraine, a psychic background noise that frayed his nerves and blurred the edges of his focus. But just moments ago, it had spiked, a searing lance of precognitive terror that cut through his exhaustion. He was here. A giggle echoed through the ruins, distorted and unnatural. It bounced off the hollowed-out buildings, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. It was high-pitched, manic, and utterly devoid of humor. Hero! Oh, little hero! Are you tired? You look so tired. The voice slithered through the downpour. Running on fumes, aren't you? A little rabbit, hopping from one disaster to another. Hop, hop, hop! Izuku pushed off the ledge, using a wisp of float to cushion his descent. He landed silently in the center of a ravaged plaza, his metal-soled boots making no sound on the wet pavement. His eyes, glowing with the emerald fire of One for All, scanned the oppressive darkness. Smokescreen was out of the question. He was too low on energy, and in this rain, it would be useless. Show yourself. Izuku's voice was a low rasp, raw from disuse and fatigue. A section of air directly in front of him began to shimmer, like heat haze on a summer road. The light bent around it, the sound of the rain warping into a discordant melody. A circle, no more than a meter in diameter, tore open in the fabric of reality. It wasn't a clean void. It was a fractured, glitching window into somewhere else. Through it, for a fleeting second, Izuku saw a sky of burning orange and a landscape of twisted, alien trees. Then the portal snapped shut with a sound like tearing canvas. Ooh, impatient! The voice tittered, now coming from his left. Another portal winked into existence, this one showing a brief, dizzying glimpse of an upside-down, underwater cavern. My quirk isn't for fighting, you know. It's for redecorating. Why have one boring reality when you can have pieces of all of them? A man stepped out from behind a toppled bus, and he was disappointingly normal. He was lanky, dressed in a cheap, soaked suit, with slicked back hair and a pair of spectacles perched on his nose. The only thing unsettling about him was the wide, unblinking smile plastered on his face and the device strapped to his chest, a humming, pulsating contraption of wires, vacuum tubes, and polished brass that seemed to be the source of the spatial anomalies. He called himself Distortion. His real name didn't matter. All this, Distortion said, gesturing to the devastation around them, is so final. So permanent. I prefer a bit more chaos, danger sense flared. Not from the man but from above. Izuku looked up. A 10-ton slab of concrete, dislodged from a building 100 meters up, was plummeting directly toward the villain, but Distortion didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a hand, and a shimmering portal opened directly above his head. The slab of concrete fell into it, and vanished. A second later, another portal opened 50 feet to the side, and the slab shot out horizontally, smashing into the facade of a neighboring building with a deafening crunch. See? Distortion giggled. Recycling! Izuku's mind raced, cataloging, analyzing. The villain's quirk created unstable, short-range portals. The device on his chest seemed to stabilize and aim them. He wasn't a physical threat, but his defensive and redirectional capabilities were absolute. A direct attack would be turned back on him, or on the city. This required finesse. Something Izuku was running desperately low on. He took a breath, channeling a sliver of power. Black Whip. Tendrils of dark energy erupted from his arms, not as a blunt weapon, but as a swarm of grasping, sentient whips. They shot past Distortion, ignoring him completely, and wrapped around the unstable supports of the buildings surrounding the plaza. With a grunt of effort, Izuku pulled. The groan of stressed metal and concrete filled the air as tons of rubble began to shift. He wasn't attacking the villain. He was collapsing the environment, attempting to bury him, to trap him. Distortion's smile widened. Clever rabbit! He slapped the device on his chest. Dozens of small, shimmering portals, no bigger than dinner plates, blinked into existence all around him. The tendrils of Black Whip that passed near them were simply snipped. They entered one portal and didn't emerge from another, their connection to Izuku severed. He felt the backlash as a jolt, a drain on his already dwindling reserves. You have to get all of me, Distortion chirped. Or you get none of me. Suddenly, a new sensation cut through the migraine of danger sense. It was sharper, more immediate. A spike of pure, unadulterated terror. It wasn't from the villain. It was from behind him. Izuku spun around. Huddled in the shattered shell of what was once a bus stop was a young girl, no older than 7, clutching a grimy stuffed cat. She was staring at the battle with wide, terrified eyes. She must have been hiding there for days. Distortion's gaze followed his. Oh! A spectator! I didn't account for that. How wonderfully unpredictable! Izuku's blood ran cold. His singular focus, his entire self-sacrificial crusade, was built on one principle: protect the innocent. He had isolated himself from his friends, from his mentors, to become a shield. A shield that had just failed to notice a civilian in the line of fire. Don't you move! Izuku growled, his body tensing, green lightning crackling more intensely around him. Or what? Distortion's smile finally vanished, replaced by a look of clinical curiosity. You'll hit me? I think we've established that's not a very good idea. He tapped his device again. A large portal ripped open in the air between him and Izuku. Through it, Izuku saw the girl in the bus stop, her terrified face reflected in the shimmering tear. The portal was acting like a mirror, but the perspective was all wrong. Let's play a game of catch, Distortion said softly. He flicked his wrist, and a piece of rebar from the ground next to him flew into a small portal at his feet. Danger Sense screamed. The rebar didn't reappear from the portal aimed at Izuku. It was going to emerge from a new one, right next to the girl. There was no time for a plan. No time for finesse. No time for 30% or 45%. There was only a choice. Izuku saw the world in slow motion. The rebar disappearing. The girl's gasp. The villain's expectant look. He saw the faces of his friends, Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and the weary, proud face of All Might. He had left them to prevent this exact scenario, to take the entire burden so they would never be targets. The weight of that decision, of that sacrifice, pressed down on him. If he failed here, alone in the rain, it was all for nothing. I have to save her. The vestiges within him, the silent chorus of past users, seemed to lean forward in anticipation. He could feel their power, a boundless ocean waiting for him to open the floodgates. F.A. Jean, he thought, releasing the kinetic energy stored in his muscles from his earlier movements. It gave him an explosive start. Float, he commanded, lifting him from the ground, eliminating the friction of the terrain. And then, he opened the gates. One for all. 100%! The world ceased to exist in color and sound. It became a pure, blinding explosion of emerald light. The air pressure dropped so suddenly his ears popped. The rain falling around him vaporized into a cloud of steam. The pain was immediate and absolute, a supernova of agony igniting in every cell of his body. But his mind was crystal clear. In the frozen picosecond of his full power, he saw everything. He saw the new portal opening by the girl's head. He saw the tip of the rebar just beginning to emerge. He saw the widening eyes of Distortion as the villain finally understood the true magnitude of the power he was facing. He didn't run. He was simply there, One moment he was in the center of the plaza, the next he was in front of the girl, a living shield of green lightning. His arm, already fracturing under the strain, shot out. He didn't punch the rebar, he caught it. His armored fingers, glowing with incandescent power, closed around the metal rod just as its tip was an inch from the girl's cheek. The metal screamed and crumpled in his grip like foil. He tossed the mangled rebar aside. The entire sequence had taken less than 1/10 of a second. He turned his head, his eyes burning holes in the dark. It's over. Distortion was fumbling with his device, his face a mask of panic. The central crystal was glowing a violent, unstable crimson. No, no, no! Too much energy! The matrix is collapsing! You broke it! You broke everything. The large portal behind Izuku, the one that Distortion had opened, began to flicker and warp violently. It was no longer a window. It was a vortex. The orange sky within it swirled into a maelstrom of impossible colors. It began to pull, a ravenous, silent hunger tugging at the world around it. Debris, rain, and ash were drawn into its maw. Izuku felt the pull on his back. He planted his feet, his reinforced boots cracking the pavement, but the suction was immense. He turned, shielding the little girl with his body. It's okay, he tried to say, but the word was stolen from his lungs. The vortex was growing, feeding on the ambient energy of his 100% output. Distortion shrieked as the device on his chest sparked and then exploded, sending him flying backward. The vortex, now untethered, went wild. It swelled to the size of a building, its gravitational pull becoming irresistible. Izuku felt his feet lift from the ground. He wrapped the girl in his arms, twisting his body to take the brunt of whatever was to come. He fired Black Whip, aiming for a solid piece of foundation, but the tendrils were sucked into the portal before they could find purchase. The last thing he saw of his world was the little girl's face, her eyes wide with awe and terror, as she was pulled from his arms by an invisible force that pushed her away from the portal, a final, unconscious act of his quirk protecting her. Then, the universe tore apart. Izuku Midoriya was consumed by the silent, screaming chaos. The world went white, then black, and then nothing at all. The first sensation was cold. A deep, biting cold that seeped into his bones. The second was the rhythmic, gentle rocking. The third was a cacophony of alien sounds assaulting his danger sense. It wasn't the sharp spike of a threat, but a constant, overwhelming flood of wrongness. The hum of unfamiliar engines, the distant wail of a strange siren, the scent of salt and gasoline, and things his brain had no name for. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He was submerged. Murky water enveloped him, and the muted sunlight from above cast shifting, wavering patterns across his vision. Panic flared, but it was a distant, exhausted thing. He was too tired for panic. His lungs burned, but his body was a dead weight, refusing to obey. The 100% output had taken its toll. He felt shattered, his bones knitting themselves back together with agonizing slowness, his muscles screaming in protest. With a final, desperate surge of will, he kicked. His head broke the surface. He gasped, coughing up a lungful of brackish water that tasted of pollution and sea salt. He was in a massive bay, surrounded by ships larger than any he had ever seen. In the distance, a sprawling, futuristic city rose toward the sky, its architecture a bizarre mix of sleek glass towers and odd, garish structures. One building in particular drew his eye, a massive, T-shaped tower standing on a small island in the bay. He was not in Japan. The realization hit him not with a shock, but with a profound, hollow emptiness. He was alone. More alone than he had ever been. All his running, all his fighting, all for this. To be lost in a place that wasn't his own, while his world, while his friends. The thought was a physical blow. He choked back a sob, the salt water stinging his eyes. He had failed. It was then that the alarms began. A loud, piercing siren blared from the T-shaped tower, its urgent call echoing across the water. A red light began to flash at its peak. They know I'm here, he thought, a flicker of his old instincts returning. Hostiles? His danger sense gave a specific, sharp jolt. He looked up. 5 figures were descending from the sky, flying from the tower toward his position. One was a streak of green. One was a dark silhouette with a cape. One was a blaze of pink energy. One was a hulking metal shape propelled by rockets. And one was just a dark-robed figure floating serenely. His battle-worn mind, conditioned by months of fighting villains with powerful and varied quirks, didn't see rescuers. It saw a strike team. A powerful, coordinated group of unknowns converging on his position. His hand instinctively went to his side, but his gear was damaged, his support items lost. He was injured, exhausted, and vulnerable. This was not a time for diplomacy. This was a time for survival. "What do you have for me, Sai?" Robin's voice was sharp, all business, as he soared through the air on his grapple line. Below him, the T-car sped across the bridge connecting the island to the city, with the rest of the team keeping pace. "Still can't get a lock on it, man." Cyborg's voice crackled through the comms. He was flying alongside Starfire, his boot jets leaving a trail of white fire. "The energy signature is off the charts. It's not magic, it's not alien tech I recognize, and it's not a metagene I've ever seen indexed. It's like pure biological energy. And a lot of it. The impact in the bay was the size of a small truck, but the energy reading is more like a power plant." Robin summarized, his eyes narrowed behind his mask. "Be ready for anything. Maybe it's a friendly space whale." Beast Boy chirped, flying alongside them as a pteranodon. "And he's come to give us space whale candy." "Focus, Beast Boy," Robin snapped. "My scans indicate a life form." Starfire added, her voice laced with its usual earnest concern. "It appears to be humanoid. And it is in distress." Raven, floating silently at the rear of the group, said nothing. But she could feel it. A turbulent nexus of emotion roiling the waters below. Pain, confusion, grief, and a fierce, bone-deep exhaustion. But beneath it all, there was something else. A static hum of immense power, coiled and waiting. And fainter still, something that made the gem on her forehead feel cold. Whispers. Echoes, like a room crowded with ghosts. They arrived at the impact site in moments. The bay was churning where the object had landed. In the center of the disturbance, a figure was treading water, his head just above the surface. As they drew closer, they could make out the details. It was a teenage boy, not much older than they were. He was clad in a bizarre, tattered green and black costume that looked like it had been through a war zone. Metal plates were strapped to his arms and legs, and a battered respirator hung around his neck. But the most striking features were the scars that crisscrossed his arms, visible where his suit was torn, and the shock of wild, green-black hair plastered to his forehead, and his eyes. They were glowing with a faint, emerald light, filled with a desperate, hunted look. When he saw them, he didn't call for help. He didn't wave. His body coiled like a snake, his posture shifting into a low, defensive stance even in the water. He started speaking, the words sharp and guttural, in a language none of them recognized. "Who are you? Are you with All for One? Answer me!" Izuku yelled in Japanese, his voice rough. Robin landed gracefully on a nearby buoy, the rest of the team hovering in the air or landing beside him. "We're the Teen Titans. We're here to help." To Izuku, the words were meaningless, aggressive sounds. He saw the boy in red and black, his posture radiating authority, and immediately classified him as the leader. He saw the metal giant, a walking arsenal. He saw the girl with glowing hands and eyes, a clear energy type. This was a villain squad, and they were cornering him. "Stay back," he warned, his own voice sounding weak to his ears. Robin held up a hand, a universal gesture to calm down. "Easy. We're not going to hurt you." He took a step forward. That was the wrong move. Izuku's instincts, honed by assassins and monsters, screamed. He saw the step as the beginning of an attack. In a flash of green lightning, he reacted. He kicked off the water surface, a miniature shockwave propelling him backward, and landed on another buoy 20 feet away. The movement was impossibly fast, a blur of motion that made Robin's eyes widen. "Whoa, okay. Fast," Cyborg muttered, his sonic cannon whirring as it charged. "My turn." "Cyborg, wait!" Robin commanded, but it was too late. A blast of concentrated sound erupted from Cyborg's arm, aimed to stun, not to harm. It hit Izuku square in the chest. He grunted, stumbling back, a sharp pain lancing through his ribs. The force was staggering, far more than he'd expected. But his suit, reinforced with iron plates, and the raw resilience gifted by One for All held. He bent, but he did not break. He weathered the blast, his feet sliding but not losing their purchase on the slippery surface of the buoy. Cyborg's jaw, the human half, dropped. No way. Nobody just tanks a full-power sonic blast. Izuku glared at them, his chest heaving. The pain was clearing the fog of exhaustion, replacing it with the sharp adrenaline of a fight for his life. These were not low-level thugs. They were powerful. He had to end this, create an opening, and escape. Robin, seeing the situation escalating, pulled a boomerang from his belt. Last chance. Stand down, he threw it. The projectile flew with pinpoint accuracy, aimed to pin Izuku's torn cape to the buoy. Izuku didn't even seem to watch it. His head snapped to the side, danger sense screaming a warning. He dropped, letting the boomerang skim over his head, and pushed off the buoy in a low crouch. He shot across the water's surface, a green comet leaving a wake behind him, not away from them, but toward them. He's attacking! Beast Boy yelped, transforming into a gorilla midair and dropping onto the buoy Robin occupied, ready for a fight. Robin pulled out his bow staff, extending it and spinning it into a defensive position. Titan's tack! He never finished the sentence. Izuku was moving with a speed that defied physics. He wasn't at 100%, not even 20%. He was using FA gene, releasing stored kinetic energy in controlled bursts. To the Titans, he was a phantom. He blurred past Beast Boy's clumsy swing. He weaved under Robin's staff, his movements so fluid and economical that the Teen Titan leader felt like he was swinging at air. Robin was a master martial artist, one of the best in the world. He had fought assassins, demons, and super soldiers. But he had never fought anyone who moved like this. It wasn't just speed, it was a terrifying, preternatural efficiency. Every twitch, every feint was perfect. Izuku wasn't trying to hit them. He was trying to get past them. He was aiming for the city, for a place to hide, to recover, to understand what was happening. But they were blocking his path, a wall of capes and chrome. He needed to break their formation. He skidded to a halt on the water's surface for a fraction of a second, the water seeming to turn solid under his feet from the sheer force. Green energy coalesced around his right hand, the lightning intensifying. He held up his hand, fingers flicked back, aiming not at them, but at the empty space of water directly in front of the group. He's powering up! Cyborg yelled, raising his cannon again. Starfire, who had been watching with wide, worried eyes, flew forward. Wait! I do not sense any malice from him. Only fear! Izuku didn't hear her. He saw her flying toward him, a glowing green projectile, and his resolve hardened. Delaware smash! Air Force! He flicked his finger. It was only 5%. A tiny fraction of his full potential. But to the Teen Titans, it was like being hit by a hurricane. A cannonball of pure, compressed air exploded from his fingertip. It wasn't an energy blast. It was a physical, concussive force that struck the surface of the bay and erupted. A wall of water and wind blasted outwards. Beast Boy was thrown from the buoy like a ragdoll, his gorilla form not enough to anchor him. He yelped as he flew backward, transforming into a pelican to right himself in the air. Cyborg, caught mid-flight, was sent tumbling end over end, his stabilizers screaming as he fought for control. Robin was ripped from his perch, his grapple lines snapping taut and saving him from being flung into the city, but the whiplash was violent. Starfire, caught closest to the blast, took the brunt of it. The force extinguished her glowing aura for a moment, and she cried out in surprise as she was shoved back 100 feet, her flight path thrown into disarray. Only Raven, encased in a bubble of dark energy, held her position, though even she was rocked by the force of it. Her eyes were wide behind her hood. All that power, from a single flick of a finger, and he wasn't even aiming to kill. He had deliberately targeted the water to create a non-lethal shockwave. It was a display of power and control that was utterly terrifying. The bay was a churning mess. The Titans were scattered, disoriented, and completely shocked. The fight, if it could even be called that, had lasted less than 30 seconds, and they had been utterly and completely outclassed. In the center of it all, Izuku stood, panting. The small exertion had cost him dearly. Black spots danced in his vision. The fire in his muscles had become a roaring inferno. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind only the profound, soul-crushing exhaustion. He had created his opening. He could run now, but as he looked at the scattered figures, a flicker of something broke through his combat haze. He saw the green girl, Starfire, steadying herself, her expression not one of anger, but of deep concern. He saw the leader, Robin, hanging from his line, staring at him not with hate, but with stunned disbelief. They weren't pressing the attack. They were regrouping, checking on each other. The image was so painfully familiar. It looked like his friends. It looked like a team. The confusion, the doubt, was a crack in his armor of desperation. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. Who were these people? That moment was all it took. The last of his energy reserves vanished. The green lightning sputtering around him died out. The strength that had held his broken body together gave way. A wave of vertigo washed over him so intensely that the world tilted on its axis. His legs buckled. He saw Starfire's eyes, the same brilliant green as his own power, widen in alarm. She flew toward him, her hands outstretched. "Please," she said, her voice carrying across the water, filled with an empathy that transcended language. "Let us help you." Help. It was a word he hadn't heard directed at him in a long, long time. He had been the help. The only help. The idea that someone else could offer it to him was so foreign, so overwhelming. His consciousness frayed. The edges of his vision dissolved into blackness. The last thing he saw was Starfire's worried face, framed by a cascade of crimson hair, drawing closer. The last thing he felt was a presence at the edge of his perception, a cool, calm shadow in the storm of his mind. He collapsed forward, his body finally surrendering, and splashed into the cold, dark water of the bay, unconscious before he was fully submerged. The Titans watched in stunned silence as their mysterious, impossibly powerful opponent simply fell. Starfire was the first to move, diving and catching him before he could sink, her arms wrapping around his torso. She lifted him from the water, his dead weight a surprising burden. He was solid muscle. "He's out cold," she said, her voice soft. Robin grappled to the buoy beside her, his mind still reeling. What was that?" Cyborg landed with a heavy splash, his systems rebooting. "I don't know, man. But my scanners are going haywire. The energy output from that little flick was astronomical. He could have flattened a city block if he'd actually hit us." Beast Boy, now back in human form, paddled over on a piece of debris. "Dude, did you see his arms? He's covered in scars. He looks like he just crawled out of a nightmare." They all looked at the unconscious boy in Starfire's arms. His face, no longer contorted in a warrior's grimace, looked impossibly young. A smear of dirt was on his cheek, and his expression was one of deep, troubled peace. Raven floated down, her hood drawn low. She reached out a pale, hesitant hand, not to touch him, but to feel the psychic space he occupied. As her senses brushed against his unconscious mind, she recoiled as if burned. It was a maelstrom. A tempest of raw, untamed power that made her own demonic heritage feel like a candle in a hurricane. But it was the other thing that truly terrified and fascinated her, the ghosts. They weren't specters or spirits in the traditional sense. They were echoes. Imprints of will and personality, layered one on top of the other, all residing within him. She felt a flicker of a stern woman with a floating mane of hair, a stoic man with a scarred face, a kind, muscular giant with a blinding smile. 7 distinct presences, a silent chorus swirling around the boy's own bright, burning soul. They were a part of him, a source of his strength, and the source of an unimaginable burden. The storm of power, the sea of pain, the choir of ghosts. "Raven?" Robin asked, noticing her strange reaction. "What is it?" Raven pulled her hand back, her own mind reeling from the psychic backlash. She looked at the strange boy, this fallen green comet, and for the first time, she felt a sliver of understanding, and a profound sense of dread. "He's not just strong," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the lapping waves. "He's crowded." The first thing to penetrate the deep, dreamless void was a sound. A soft, rhythmic beeping, as steady and placid as a heartbeat. It was a sound of clinical calm, a sound of life being measured and monitored. For Izuku Midoriya, whose entire world had become a cacophony of screams, explosions, and the psychic thrum of his own danger sense, the silence between the beeps was the most alien thing of all. His eyelids were heavy, glued shut with a profound exhaustion that felt bone deep. He tried to move a hand, to assess his injuries, but his limbs were leaden weights. A faint, sterile scent filled his nostrils, antiseptic and recycled air. Not a hospital. Too clean. Too quiet. A laboratory, maybe? A prison? Panic, a familiar old friend, began to prick at the edges of his consciousness. He forced his eyes open. The world swam into focus in blurry shapes and muted colors. He was lying on a bed that was unnaturally soft, a thin white blanket tucked neatly around him. The beeping came from a sleek, futuristic monitor beside the bed, displaying fluctuating lines of emerald green that mirrored his own pulse. An IV tube was taped gently to the back of his hand, feeding a clear fluid into his veins. He was shirtless, his upper body crisscrossed with the familiar, ugly tapestry of his scars, both old and new. They had cleaned him up. His wounds felt distant. The searing agony of using 100% was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant ache, but even that was fading, as if being actively suppressed by whatever was in the foredrip. He turned his head slowly, muscles protesting. The room was circular, with stark white walls and a large, panoramic window that looked out not onto a city, but onto the vast, gray expanse of the bay he'd fallen into. In the distance, the strange, sprawling city glittered under a midday sun. He was in the T-shaped tower. Vital signs are stabilizing. A deep, synthesized voice said from his left. Cellular regeneration is, well, it's nuts. I've never seen anything like it. The rate of tissue repair is 400% above baseline human norms, and that's after massive systemic trauma. Whatever energy he uses, it heals him almost as fast as it tears him apart. Izuku's eyes snapped toward the voice. Standing by a console of monitors was the metal giant from the bay. Up close, he was even more intimidating. A hulking figure of polished chrome and dark steel, half man, half machine. One of his eyes was a glowing red optic, scanning data that scrolled across a holographic screen projected from his wrist. He seemed less like a captor and more like a deeply engrossed scientist. And the energy readings are still residual. The metal man, Cyborg, continued, mostly to himself. Latent potential is off the charts. It's like every cell in his body is a tiny, fully charged battery. From the shadows near the door, another figure spoke. The leader. Robin. His arms were crossed, his posture radiating a coiled tension. His mask hid his eyes, but Izuku could feel the weight of his analytical gaze. Can he be a threat? Robin's voice was clipped, pragmatic. Threat? Robin, the kid's a walking nuke, Cyborg said without looking up from his data. That air blast in the bay? That was the equivalent of a small torpedo. And he did it by flicking his finger. If he wanted us gone, we'd be mopping up bits of the T-car from the bottom of the ocean. Izuku pushed himself up, hissing as his abdominal muscles screamed in protest. The movement immediately drew their attention. Cyborg's red eye swiveled to him. Robin tensed, his hand inching toward his utility belt. Izuku held up his hands in a gesture of surrender, his mind racing. He was in their base, injured, and they were analyzing him like a captured specimen. He was in no condition to fight his way out. He tried to speak, to ask the 1,000 questions burning in his mind, but all that came out was a stream of desperate Japanese. Where am I? What is this place? The villain, the portal, did anyone else? Robin's posture didn't relax. He's talking. Sai, can you translate? Working on it, but the syntax and phonemes don't match any database I have. It's definitely Earth-based East Asian root, but it's divergent. Like it split off a few centuries ago and evolved on its own. Cyborg turned to face Izuku fully, his expression a mixture of fascination and frustration. Look, buddy. We're not gonna hurt you. Can you understand me? My name is Cyborg. Izuku just stared, his heart sinking. The language barrier was a wall as solid as any prison. He was trapped, unable to communicate, surrounded by beings of immense power whom he had just attacked. The door to the infirmary slid open with a soft hiss. The 4 other members of the team entered. The small green boy, Beast Boy, looked at him with wide, curious eyes. The dark-robed girl, Raven, lingered by the door, her face an unreadable mask beneath her hood, but Izuku felt a strange sense of calm emanating from her, a stark contrast to the storm inside him. And then there was the girl with the glowing green eyes, Starfire. She stepped forward, her expression one of pure, undiluted empathy. The hostility from their first encounter was gone, replaced by a gentle concern that was so earnest it was disarming. "He is frightened," she said, her voice like soft chimes. "He does not understand us." "No kidding," Robin muttered, not taking his eyes off Izuku. "He understands a fight just fine." Starfire ignored him. She approached the bed slowly, her hands held up in a placating gesture. Izuku flinched back, pressing himself against the headboard, his danger sense giving a low, confused hum. It didn't sense a threat from her, only something unknown. Something powerful. "Please," she said softly, her alien accent smoothing the edges of the foreign words. "Do not be alarmed. I can help." She stopped beside his bed. "On my world, Tamarin, we are able to assimilate languages through physical contact. It is how I learned to speak your tongue." She gestured between herself and Robin. "It may be startling, but it is the only way." Izuku stared at her, then at the others. Robin gave a curt nod. Cyborg shrugged his massive metal shoulders. This was apparently a normal procedure for them. It was anything but normal for him, but what choice did he have? He gave a short, hesitant nod, his throat tight. Starfire smiled, a small, reassuring expression. She sat on the edge of the bed. Izuku's entire body went rigid. He was used to combat, to pain, to the brutal physicality of a fight. This quiet, deliberate intimacy was 1,000 times more terrifying. The outline for the fanfiction mentioned a kiss, but Starfire, sensing his extreme tension and the context of a medical setting, adapted. She gently reached out and placed her hand on his forehead, her fingers cool against his feverish skin. "This will be faster," she whispered, and then it happened. It wasn't a psychic intrusion like a mind-reading quirk. It was a flood. A torrent of pure information poured directly into his brain. He felt the structure of English, its grammar, its syntax, the rhythm and flow of its sentences. He felt the emotional weight of words, the joy in pizza, the authority in stop, the sorrow in goodbye. The language didn't just appear in his mind, it was woven into the fabric of his understanding, stitched into place by an invisible, gentle needle. The process was dizzying, overwhelming, like drinking from a fire hose. He squeezed his eyes shut, a groan escaping his lips. For Starfire, the experience was just as intense. As she gave him her language, she received fragments of his. But more than that, she felt the context. She tasted the word Katsudan, and felt a mother's love. She felt the weight of sensei, and the deep ache of respect and loss. She felt the name All Might and was struck by a blinding, godlike image of a smiling giant, a symbol of hope so powerful it was a physical force. And she felt the word Kaken, and with it, a maelstrom of childhood rivalry, pain, admiration, and a bond so deep and complicated it had no equivalent in her own mind. When she pulled her hand away after a few seconds, they both gasped. Izuku's head was spinning, the new language settling into place like a new operating system booting up for the first time. He looked at the anxious faces around him and found the words, strange and clumsy, on his tongue. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice a raw whisper. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. "You're in Jump City," Cyborg said, a grin spreading across his human cheek. "Specifically, you're in our house. Titan's Tower." Izuku's eyes darted to the window, to the unfamiliar skyline. Jump City. I've never heard of it. His mind was finally catching up to the impossible reality of his situation. He looked down at his scarred hands. "The girl," he said, his voice cracking. "There was a little girl. In a bus stop. Did she? Starfire's expression softened. "We do not know. You were the only one who came through the event." The hollowness from the bay returned, a cold, heavy weight in his chest. He had saved her from the rebar. But had he saved her from the portal? Or had he doomed her by creating the energy surge that caused it to collapse? He squeezed his eyes shut, the familiar guilt clawing at him. Robin stepped forward, his tone cutting through the quiet moment. Enough. Time for questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? And what was that power you used? Izuku looked at the young man who was clearly their leader. He saw the suspicion in his posture, the demand in his voice. This wasn't a friendly chat, it was an interrogation. He took a steadying breath, the new words still feeling awkward. My name is Izuku Midoriya. My hero name is Deku, Beast Boy snickered. Deku? Doesn't that mean, like, useless? He'd caught the meaning from the linguistic transfer. Izuku flinched, the old wound stinging even here, in another world. It can also mean you can do it, he said quietly, a defiant edge to his voice. A friend, she gave it a new meaning for me, he explained, haltingly at first, then with more confidence as the language settled. He told them about his world, a world where over 80% of the population was born with a superpower, a meta ability they called a quirk. He described the society that had sprung up around it, the hero academies, the licensed pro-heroes, the complex laws governing quirk usage. Cyborg was captivated, leaning forward and peppering him with questions. So it's a genetic trait? A universal metagene? How are the powers categorized? Is it elemental, physical, psychic? All of those, Izuku said, remembering his classes at UA. They're classified as emitter, transformation, or mutant type. It's complicated, fascinating. Cyborg breathed, already imagining the research possibilities. Robin was unimpressed. A world full of superpowered people, he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. And you just happened to fall out of a hole in the sky. It's a convenient story. It explains why there's no record of you anywhere on Earth. No fingerprints, no dental records, no identity. It's the truth, Izuku insisted, pushing himself up straighter. I was fighting a villain. His quirk created tears in space. Portals. My power surge overloaded his device and one of the portals became unstable. It pulled me in. Your power, Robin repeated, circling the word like a predator. You nearly blew my team apart with a flick of your finger. No one has that kind of power. What is it? What's your quirk? Izuku hesitated. The story of One for All was a sacred secret, a heavy legacy passed down through generations in a desperate war against its antithesis, All for One. He couldn't just tell them. The weight of his promise to All Might, the faces of the vestiges who lived inside him, sealed his lips. It's a strength-enhancing quirk, he mumbled, looking down at his hands. A power stockpiling type. Raven, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. Her voice was a low, monotone hum, but it cut through the room with an unnerving clarity. He's not lying, she said. All eyes turned to her. She was looking at Izuku, her violet eyes seeming to pierce through him, to see the storm within. Not about where he's from, she clarified. His emotions are chaotic. He's grieving for a world he thinks he's lost. But his story is genuine. The rest, she trailed off, her gaze becoming distant. The rest is more complicated. He's hiding something. A great burden. The mention of a burden made Izuku's breath catch. It was as if she could see the silent council of vestiges standing behind him. He met her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a spark of unnerving recognition. She saw more than the others. Before Robin could press his interrogation further, a klaxon blared through the tower. The same alarm Izuku had heard from the bay. A map of the city appeared on a large screen on the wall, a red, pulsating icon marking a location downtown. Trouble, Cyborg said, his friendly demeanor gone, replaced by focus. It's Plasmus. He's out of cold storage and on a rampage at the chemical plant. Again? Beast Boy groaned. Didn't we just deal with him last month? That guy is the worst kind of gooey. Robin turned to his team, instantly taking command. Titans, move out. Standard containment protocol. Cyborg, you're on cryofomus. Starfire, focused heat blast to harden him. Beast Boy, distraction. Raven, try to find the human core. I'll coordinate. He then turned back to Izuku, his expression firm. You! Stay here. You're injured, and you're an unknown. Don't get involved. The words were a physical blow to Izuku. Stay here. Don't get involved. It was the opposite of everything he had become. He had left his friends, his school, his entire life behind so that he would always be involved, so that no one else would have to be. To be told to stand by while people were in danger was anathema to his very soul. No! Izuku said, the word quiet but unyielding. Robin stopped, turning back slowly. What did you say? Izuku swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the protests of his muscles. He stood up, unsteady but resolute. There's a villain attacking. People could be in danger. My duty as a hero is to help. I can't. I won't just stay here. Your duty? Robin scoffed, taking a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. You're not a licensed hero here. You're a person of interest with a ridiculously high threat level. You are a liability. You will stay, or I will make you stay. The threat hung in the air. Izuku met his gaze, the emerald glow in his eyes intensifying. For a moment, the two leaders, one a seasoned strategist, the other a battle-forged warrior, faced off, an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force. It was Starfire who broke the tension, placing a hand on Robin's shoulder. Robin, there is no time. The people of Jump City need us. We can deal with him, when we return. Robin clenched his jaw, then gave a sharp nod. He looked at Izuku one last time. Don't make me regret leaving you unrestrained. And with that, the Titans were gone. The infirmary door hissed shut, leaving Izuku alone with the quiet beeping of the monitor and the distant, echoing sound of the alarm. He stood there for a long moment, the leader's words echoing in his head. Liability. Unknown. He looked out the window. He couldn't see the chemical plant, but he could imagine the scene. The chaos, the fear. The people trapped inside. He thought of the little girl at the bus stop. He thought of all the people he'd failed to save in his own world, the ghosts of his failures that drove him onward. Robin was wrong. He wasn't a liability, he was a hero. And a hero's place was on the battlefield. With a grunt of effort, he ripped the floor from his hand and began searching for his costume. The SDR Lab's chemical plant was a hellscape of purple goo and panic screams. Plasmus, a monstrous, amoebic creature of protoplasm, was on a rampage. He had absorbed several vats of industrial solvent, making him larger and more volatile than ever. He swatted away police cars like toys, his gelatinous body absorbing bullets with wet plops. The Teen Titans arrived in a flurry of coordinated action. Spread out! Don't let him corner you! Robin yelled, firing a series of explosive discs at the creature's base. They detonated, splattering purple goo everywhere, but Plasmus merely shuddered and reformed, seemingly unfazed. My cryoformers are having minimal effect! Cyborg shouted, his cannons coating a section of the monster in white frost, only for the ooze to melt it off moments later. The solvents he absorbed are acting as an anti-freeze. Starfire flew high above, raining down brilliant green star bolts. They struck Plasmus's form, causing parts of him to sizzle and harden into a brittle crust, but he was regenerating faster than she could damage him. It was like trying to boil the ocean one cup at a time. Beast Boy, as a rampaging T-Rex, charged the monster, trying to bite and tear at it. But his teeth just sunk into the goo, and he was forced to retreat, spitting out the disgusting purple slime. Gross! It tastes like angry grape jelly. He yelled after transforming back. I can't find a center! Raven called out, her dark energy probing the massive form. The human consciousness, Otto von Firth, is dispersed throughout the entire mass. There's no core to target. They were fighting a losing battle. Their teamwork, usually a well-oiled machine, was failing against a brute force problem that had no clear weakness. They were containing him, just barely, but they weren't winning. And then Robin saw it. A city bus, caught in the evacuation, had stalled at the edge of the plant. Its doors were open, the driver trying frantically to get the engine to turn over, while the passengers screamed in terror. Plasmus, in a mindless rage, swiped a massive pseudopod at a nearby chemical tank. The tank buckled and flew through the air, end over end, on a direct collision course with the bus. No! Robin yelled, firing his grapple, knowing it would be too slow, too weak. Starfire blasted the tank, but only managed to alter its trajectory by a few feet. It was still going to hit. Suddenly, a flash of green lightning cut through the chaos. It was a sound before it was a sight, a sonic boom that cracked the air. A green blur shot past the Titans, moving so fast it was barely a smear of color. Izuku, his tattered costume back on and his respirator covering his mouth, appeared between the flying tank and the bus. He didn't try to stop it head-on. He jumped, his feet leaving spiderweb cracks on the asphalt, and fired a volley of black-whipped tendrils. They weren't aimed at the tank itself, but wrapped around it like a net, a cradle of dark energy. He landed on the roof of the bus, the metal groaning under the impact, and pulled. The multi-ton tank, its momentum arrested by the black energy, stopped dead in the air, a foot from the bus's windshield. With a mighty heave, Izuku swung it around and slammed it into the ground a safe distance away, the impact shaking the earth. The passengers on the bus stared, mouths agape. The Titans froze, their own battle forgotten for a moment as they watched. Izuku landed on the ground in front of the bus, his back to the people he just saved. He turned his attention to the real threat. Plasmus roared, its dispersed consciousness now focusing on this new, vibrant source of energy. "Get those people out of here!" Izuku yelled at the Titans, not waiting for a reply. His voice was muffled by the mask, but the command was clear. Robin, shaking off his shock, reacted first. "Starfire, Beast Boy, get them clear! Cyborg, Raven, with me! We need to support him!" But Izuku didn't need support. He needed an opening. He saw the way Plasmus reformed, the way he absorbed energy. A direct, powerful punch would just be absorbed into his massive body. This required something more, a force so overwhelming, so concussive, that there was nothing left to regenerate. He crouched low, green lightning beginning to arc around his body with ferocious intensity. He could feel the vestiges stirring within him, a silent chorus of approval. This was what he was made for. Fa Gene, he thought, releasing the kinetic energy he had been building with every step, every dodge. It flooded his muscles, a supercharge layering on top of one for all. The ground around his feet began to crackle and splinter. Cyborg's optical sensor went wild, flashing red with warning signs. "Robin! His energy levels are spiking into the red zone. It's 100 times what he put out in the bay. What is he doing?" Robin yelled, but his voice was lost in the rising shriek of power. Izuku's eyes, visible above his respirator, glowed with the light of a dying star. He looked at the monstrous, mindless creature, a being of pure destructive impulse, and he saw a problem that needed a swift, definitive solution. He pulled back his right arm, the metal bracer on it groaning under the strain. The air itself seemed to thin, to warp around him. Detroit smash! He didn't even need to touch Plasmus. He punched the air in front of him. The result was not a punch. It was an extinction-level event in miniature. A solid wall of wind and pure kinetic force, visible as a distortion in the air, erupted from his fist. It was not the focused shot of an Air Force attack. It was a wide-arc cataclysm. The shockwave hit Plasmus like the hand of God. The creature didn't even have time to register the attack. The concussive force was so immense that its gelatinous body was flash-atomized. The purple goo didn't splatter, it simply disintegrated, turning into a fine violet mist that was then blown away by the gale-force winds of the attack's aftermath. The wind tore through the chemical plant, shattering windows and peeling metal from the walls. The Titans braced themselves, Cyborg digging his metal feet into the ground, Raven creating a shield of dark energy around herself and Robin. The bus, shielded by Izuku's body, rocked violently but was unharmed. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. Silence descended. The chemical plant was wrecked, but the threat was gone. Where the 20-foot-tall monster of goo had stood, there was now nothing. Not a puddle, not a drop. Just a faint purple haze and the lingering smell of grape and ozone. The Titans slowly lowered their defenses, staring at the empty space, then at the lone figure standing in the middle of it all. Izuku stood with his arm outstretched, steam pouring from it. His entire body trembled with the backlash of the 45% power output. He panted heavily, his breath fogging up the inside of his respirator. He had done it. He had saved them. He looked back at the Titans, his glowing eyes searching their faces, expecting something. Robin's mask hid his expression, but his body was rigid with shock. His meticulously planned strategies, his team's combined power, all of it had been useless, and this stranger, this child, had ended the threat in less than 3 seconds with a single, devastating blow. It was terrifying. It was magnificent, and it rendered everything Robin knew about combat completely obsolete. Cyborg's red eye was wide, no longer analyzing, just staring in raw disbelief. "Be by the allspark," he stammered. "The energy dispersal, it was clean. Surgical. He didn't just beat him. He erased him." Beast Boy, who had just finished herding the last of the passengers to safety, simply said, "Whoa, dude!" Starfire floated down, her expression a mixture of profound awe and deep, worrying concern for the boy who wielded such earth-shattering power. She saw not the weapon, but the boy trembling beneath the weight of it. Raven watched him, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from his arm. She had felt it. The surge of power, the silent agreement of the 7 souls within him, and then the sudden, sharp lance of pain as his body paid the price. This incredible strength came at a cost he was clearly willing, and terrifyingly used to, paying. He was not a brawler. He was not a brute. What they had just witnessed was not rage. It was efficiency. The brutal, terrifying, and utterly lonely efficiency of a soldier who had long since learned that the only person he could rely on in a fight was himself. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who called himself Deku, lowered his arm. He had won the battle. He had proven his worth as a hero, but as he stood alone in the wreckage, under the stunned, wary gazes of the Teen Titans, he had never felt more like a stranger. The journey back to Titan's Tower was suffocatingly quiet. The 5 founding members of the team were crammed into the T-car, a vehicle that usually buzzed with post-battle banter and triumphant shouts. Today, the only sounds were the hum of the engine, the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers against the sudden shower, and the heavy, unspoken thoughts of its occupants. Izuku Midoriya did not ride with them. He followed. He ran. He matched the T-car's speed on the bridge with an easy, loping stride, a faint trail of green energy a whisper at his heels. He kept a respectful distance, a solitary green satellite orbiting the self-contained world of the Titans. He thought it was a gesture of consideration, giving them space after he had disobeyed a direct order. To the Titans inside the car, it was something else entirely. It was a statement. He didn't need them. He didn't need their transport, their technology, or their company. Inside the car, the tension was thick enough to chew. Beast Boy, crammed in the back between a silent Raven and a grim-faced Starfire, kept glancing out the rear window at the running figure. "Dude," he finally whispered, unable to bear the silence any longer. "He's not even breaking a sweat." Cyborg, at the wheel, grunted. His hands, one metal and one flesh, were clenched tight on the steering wheel. "My sensors are telling me he's operating at less than 3% of his potential energy output. To him, this is a light jog. He neutralized plasmas," Starfire said, her voice soft and troubled. "A threat that required all 5 of us to merely contain, he erased. In an instant." "That's the problem, Star," Robin said from the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, though everyone knew he was watching Deku in the side view mirror. "He didn't neutralize him. He used a cannon to kill a fly. The collateral damage to the plant was extensive, but the bus was safe," Starfire countered, a hint of passion entering her voice. "The people were unharmed. His priority was their protection. Is that not our priority as well? Our priority is to save people without leveling the city block they're on," Robin retorted, his voice sharp. He took a breath, reining in his temper. "Look, I'm not saying his intentions were bad. I'm saying his methods are unacceptable. He's a sledgehammer in a world that often requires a scalpel. He's an unbalancing act." Raven, who had been staring out the window, her reflection a pale ghost against the glass, spoke without turning. "He is not a sledgehammer. He is a shield that has been forced to become a sword. He acts with the weight of 1,000 failures on his shoulders, real or imagined. He believes that any moment not spent at maximum effort is a moment where someone could die." Her words hung in the air, heavy and insightful. They explained his actions, but they didn't solve the fundamental problem. When they arrived at the tower, the unsettling dynamic continued. Deku stood awkwardly in the center of the main common room, a circular space with a sunken couch, kitchen area, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he had, in a way, just saved. He was still in his tattered costume, unsure of what to do or where to go. The Titans moved around him, a silent, swirling current. Cyborg went straight to his workshop, the door sliding shut behind him with a definitive hiss. The silence was more damning than a shouted word. He was the team's powerhouse, and he had just been made redundant. Beast Boy tried to break the ice. So, Deku, right? That was pretty cool back there. Like BM. And then, like whoosh. And the goo monster was just gone. You hungry? I can make us some tofu bacon burritos, he offered, trying for a cheerful grin. Izuku looked at him, his mind still processing the fight, calculating energy percentages and potential weaknesses he might have missed. The concept of a celebratory meal was utterly alien to his current mindset. I am not hungry. Thank you, he said politely, his voice stiff. The rejection, though gentle, made Beast Boy's grin falter. He shuffled off toward the kitchen, his shoulders slumped. Starfire approached, her expression radiating a gentle, maternal worry. Your arm. The one you used for the Detroit smash. It was steaming. Is it injured? Izuku instinctively flexed his right hand. The searing pain of using a high-percentage smash without full cowl at 100% was a ghost he knew well. But One for All was healing him. The microfractures were already knitting, the torn muscle fibers already regenerating. It will be fine. It is a necessary cost. A cost? Starfire's brow furrowed. To be a hero should not require you to break yourself. Sometimes it does. Izuku replied simply, his gaze distant. He was thinking of All Might, passing the torch with his last embers. He was thinking of Sir Night Eye. He was thinking of the life he had left behind. His quiet finality left Starfire with no reply. He was a fortress, and she could find no door. The only one who seemed to treat him with any semblance of normalcy was Raven. She floated past him on her way to the meditation mat, pausing for a moment. Her hood obscured her face, but he felt her gaze on him. The ghosts are quiet now, she said, her voice a low murmur. They are satisfied with the outcome. Izuku froze, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Ghosts, the voices in your head. The ones who lend you their strength. They are not a burden, they are your counsel, she stated, as if it were obvious, before continuing on her way, leaving Izuku staring after her, his mind reeling. She knew. He didn't know how she knew, but she did. The rest of the day passed in a series of these awkward, disjointed encounters. Deku was a black hole in the center of their home, his gravitational pull warping the familiar orbits of their lives. He spent most of his time standing by the window, a silent, green-clad sentinel watching over a city that wasn't his. He was on guard, waiting for the next threat, because in his world, the next threat was always just moments away. He couldn't comprehend downtime. He couldn't comprehend peace. Robin spent the day in the training room. The sounds of his bow staff striking practice dummies, of grunts and impacts, echoed faintly through the tower. He was pushing himself, working off a frustration that had no other outlet. Finally, as evening fell, Robin emerged, his face set. He strode into the common room where Deku stood his vigil. We need to talk, Robin said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He gestured toward the training room. Now, the training room was a testament to Robin's philosophy. It was a space designed for strategy, agility, and precision, not brute force. Obstacle courses, targeting systems, and sparring mats filled the area. I've analyzed the data from your fight with Plasmus, Robin began, pulling up a holographic display. It showed a 3D model of the chemical plant, with vectors and energy readings overlaid in red. Your Detroit smash produced a kinetic force equivalent to a salvo of Tomahawk missiles. The air pressure alone was enough to cause structural damage to buildings a quarter-mile away. You were lucky you didn't cause a chain reaction in the remaining chemical tanks. I was not lucky, Izuku corrected him, his voice level. He pointed to the display. My attack was directed here, at a 15-degree upward angle. The primary force was focused on the target's core mass. The resulting shockwave was calculated to dissipate over the roof of the main complex, minimizing ground-level impact. I saw the layout of the plant before I attacked. I knew which tanks were empty and which were inert. It was a calculated risk, but it was not luck. Robin stared at him, momentarily speechless. He hadn't just punched hard. He performed a complex physics calculation in the middle of a battle and executed it perfectly. The revelation was both impressive and infuriating. That's not the point, Robin snapped, swiping the display away. The point is that you acted alone. You ignored a direct order. You disregarded the team. Your team was failing, Izuku stated, not with malice, but with cold, hard fact. Your methods were not working. The bus was about to be destroyed. I made a choice. We are a team, Robin ground out, stepping closer until he was invading Izuku's personal space. That means we operate as a unit. We trust each other. We follow a plan. We don't have lone wolves going off and firing missiles whenever they feel like it. What you did today wasn't teamwork. It was a hostile takeover of our mission. My mission is to save people, Izuku shot back, the emerald glow in his eyes intensifying. He refused to be intimidated. That is my only priority. Your plan was too slow. It allowed for too many variables, too much risk to the civilians. My method was absolute. It was faster. And in a fight, faster means safer. It means fewer chances for someone to get hurt. The chasm between them was vast and unbridgeable. Robin saw a rogue element that threatened the integrity of his team. Izuku saw a leader whose caution was a liability. This cannot happen again, Robin said, his voice a low command. You are on this team now, for better or worse. That means you follow my lead. No exceptions. Am I clear? Izuku looked at the determined, angry face of the young man before him. He saw a good leader, a brilliant strategist. But he also saw someone who didn't understand the stakes as he did. He didn't understand the face of all for one, the feeling of a world on the brink of collapse. I will always prioritize saving lives over following a plan, Izuku said quietly. It was not a defiance, but a simple statement of his core principle. Robin just stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away, the silence speaking volumes. The conversation was over. Nothing had been resolved. The unbalancing act continued, and the first cracks in the foundation of the Teen Titans had begun to show. 2 days later, the alert blared. The team, minus Deku, was in the middle of a tense breakfast. Robin was drinking his coffee black, staring at a datapad. Cyborg was pointedly ignoring everyone, focusing on welding a new upgrade to his arm. Beast Boy was trying to coax a smile out of Raven with a pancake shaped like a bat, to no avail. Starfire was pushing her food around her plate, her brow furrowed with worry. Deku was, as usual, standing by the window. He hadn't slept. He had merely entered a state of low-power meditation, a trick he'd learned during his vigilante days to stay alert. When the alarm sounded, he was the first to react, his body instantly tensing. On the main screen, a face popped up, Gizmo, the diminutive, arrogant boy genius of the HIV. 5. Greetings, you troglodytic titans, his tinny voice squeaked. By now you've noticed a slight irregularity at Quantum Dynamics Labs. Consider the primary server core officially reappropriated by the HIV. Toodles, the screen went blank. The QDL server core? Cyborg swore, dropping his welder. That thing controls the city's entire power grid, water systems, and public transit. If the HIV gets full control, they could shut down the whole city. Or worse, hold it for ransom. Robin finished, already on his feet. This is a priority 1 threat. Let's move. The Titans scrambled into action, their previous tensions momentarily forgotten in the face of a crisis. Robin pulled up the blueprints for the quantum dynamics building on the main screen. Okay, here's the plan, he said, his voice crisp and authoritative. He pointed to the screen. The lab is 20 stories. The server core is in a sub-level, protected by multiple layers of security. Gizmo is no doubt holed up in there. Jinx and Mammoth will be their primary defense. He began to assign roles, his finger tracing paths on the holographic map. Cyborg, you're with me. We'll punch through the main entrance. Your job is to interface with their security system and slow Gizmo's hack. I'll provide cover. Starfire, Beast Boy, you're on aerial insertion. Break through the roof access here. He indicated the top of the building. Your job is to work your way down. Draw Mammoth's attention. He's strong, but he's slow. Keep him occupied on the upper floors. Do not engage him directly for long. Raven, he said, turning to her. You'll phase through the walls and locate Jinx. Her hexes are unpredictable. Your mission is priority 1. Neutralize her before she can destabilize our tech or turn our luck against us. Do it quietly. It was a good plan. A complex, multi-pronged assault that played to each of their strengths. It was a classic Teen Titans strategy, a symphony of coordinated chaos. Deku, who had walked over to observe, listened intently. He analyzed the plan with the practiced eye of a seasoned pro hero. He saw the logic. He also saw the flaws. Too slow, his mind screamed. Too many moving parts. The plan relied on every member executing their role perfectly. A delay in one area would create a catastrophic failure in another. If Cyborg couldn't slow the hack in time, the city would be compromised. If Raven couldn't find Jinx fast enough, a stray hex could cripple Cyborg's systems or cause Starfire's powers to go haywire. If Beast Boy and Starfire couldn't contain Mammoth, he could bring the whole building down. He saw a dozen ways it could go wrong, a dozen ways one of them could get hurt. And every second they spent on this intricate dance was a second Gizmo was closer to his goal. What about him? Cyborg asked, nodding toward Deku. Robin's eyes narrowed. He looked at Deku, a chess master considering a rogue queen that could move in any direction. He couldn't leave him behind. Deku had already proven he wouldn't stay. But how to integrate a nuke into a stealth mission? You're with me and Cyborg. Robin decided after a moment's hesitation. You're the battering ram. We hit the main entrance, you clear a path. And you will follow my orders to the letter. No improvisation, no smashes. Understood? Izuka looked at Robin. He saw the plea for control beneath the command. He saw a leader trying desperately to hold his team together. He gave a curt, simple nod. Understood, but in his heart he knew. He was lying. He had already formulated a better plan. A faster plan. The assault began exactly as Robin had planned. The T-car screeched to a halt in front of Quantum Dynamics Labs. Robin, Cyborg, and Deku burst out. Deku, the door! Robin commanded. The main entrance was a set of reinforced titanium blast doors, designed to withstand a direct assault. Deku didn't even break stride. He cocked a fist back, a flicker of green energy surrounding it. 5% was all it took. The punch connected with a deafening boom, and the multi-ton doors crumpled inward like wet cardboard, ripped clean from their hinges. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Go, go, go! Robin yelled, dashing through the opening. They were met by a hail of laser fire from automated defense turrets. Robin expertly dodged and weaved, throwing batarangs that disabled the turrets with pinpoint accuracy. Cyborg used his sonic cannon to shatter them into pieces. Deku just ran through the laser fire, the beams sizzling harmlessly against his reinforced suit, and the faint aura of one for all. They reached the elevator bank. Cyborg, get us down to the server level! Robin ordered. Cyborg jammed his fingers into the control panel, sparks flying. I'm in. Bypassing security locks. This'll take a minute. A minute. To Deku, a minute was an eternity. Up on the roof, Starfire blasted a hole through the reinforced concrete, and she and Beast Boy dropped inside, immediately being met by the lumbering form of Mammoth. Hey, ugly! Bet you can't catch me! Beast Boy yelled, turning into a hummingbird and zipping around the giant's head. Mammoth roared in frustration and started smashing everything in sight, just as planned. At the same time, Raven's shadowy form phased through the external wall on the 10th floor, her senses spread out, searching for the chaotic, unlucky aura of Jinx. The plan was working. The symphony was in motion, but Deku wasn't a musician. He was the conductor, and he had a different song in mind. While Cyborg worked and Robin stood guard, Izuka closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He took a deep breath. Smokescreen. It wasn't a massive, city-covering cloud like he'd used in his vigilante days. It was a controlled, tactical burst. A thick, impenetrable cloud of black smoke instantly filled the lobby, the elevator bank, and the first few floors of the building through the ventilation system. What the? I can't see! Cyborg yelled, his optical sensors useless in the thick particulate. Deku! What are you doing? Robin's voice was furious, lost in the blackness. I said no improvisation, but Deku was already gone. He had slipped away in the initial billow of smoke, a ghost in his own storm. To the Titans, he had just plunged their coordinated mission into chaos. From his perspective, he had just seized control of the battlefield. He used float to rise silently through the elevator shaft, bypassing Cyborg's slow hack entirely. The smoke was his cover. No one could see him, no one could target him. But he could see everything. Using a combination of his own danger sense and the faint energy signatures of the HIV members, he had a perfect map of the battlefield in his head. His first target was Jinx. Raven was still searching for her on the 10th floor, but Deku's danger sense pinpointed her a floor above, setting up an ambush. He phased through the ceiling using a micro-burst of 100% power, a trick he'd learned from Mirio, appearing behind her. Jinx spun around, her eyes widening, pink hex bolts already forming at her fingertips. She was fast. He was faster. Black Whip! Before she could even utter a curse, dozens of tendrils of black energy erupted from his back. They weren't a clumsy bludgeon. They moved with serpentine grace and intelligence. One tendril gently wrapped around her mouth, silencing her. Others pinned her arms to her sides. Several more wrapped around her legs, lifting her from the ground and cocooning her in a prison of solidified energy. The entire takedown was silent, non-lethal, and took exactly 0.8 seconds. He deposited her gently in a supply closet and moved on. Raven, a floor below, felt the chaotic aura of Jinx vanish abruptly. She paused, confused. It didn't feel like she'd been knocked out. It felt like she'd been contained. Deku's next target was Mammoth. On the 20th floor, the brute was still playing a destructive game of cat and mouse with Starfire and Beast Boy. Starfire was blasting him to keep his attention, while Beast Boy, as a mouse, scurried around his feet. Deku emerged from a stairwell door into the smoke-filled floor. Mammoth, blinded and enraged, was just swinging a massive fist at where he thought Starfire was. Deku appeared in front of the fist. He didn't block it. He caught it. His small frame, dwarfed by the giant's limb, didn't even budge. Starfire and Beast Boy stopped, staring in disbelief through a gap in the smoke. Mammoth's fist, which could punch through a tank, was held fast in the grip of the green-haired boy. "You are very strong," Deku said, his voice calm. He then proceeded to use Mammoth's own strength against him. Using a classic martial arts principle he'd learned from Aizawa, he redirected the giant's momentum, pulling him forward and off balance. Mammoth stumbled, and in that moment of vulnerability, Deku delivered a precise 8% punch to the back of his knee, buckling it. As the giant fell, another perfectly placed chop to a pressure point at the base of his neck was enough to make the behemoth's eyes roll back into his head. He collapsed unconscious. Cyborg, having finally bypassed the elevator lockdown, stepped out into the sublevel with Robin, his cannon ready. "Okay, Gizmo, party's over." He stopped. The room was already dark, the only light coming from the emergency strobes. And in the center of the room, hanging upside down from the ceiling, wrapped in a thick cocoon of black tendrils, was Gizmo. His glasses were askew, and he was gagged by a single, polite strand of black whip. The server core beside him was untouched. Standing calmly beneath the trussed-up villain was Deku, the last of his smokescreen dissipating around him. The comms crackled to life. Robin?" Beast Boy's voice. "Mammoth's down. Deku just put him to sleep. Jinx is neutralized," Raven added, her voice betraying a hint of stunned surprise. "She's wrapped up in a closet on the 11th floor." Silence. The entire HIV-5, a threat that usually required a full-scale, 20-minute battle from the entire team, had been taken down. The mission was a complete success. The city was safe, and it had taken less than 2 minutes. The Titans converged on the sublevel, finding the scene just as Cyborg had. They saw Gizmo, defeated. They saw Deku, unharmed. And they saw Robin, standing frozen, his fists clenched at his sides, his whole body shaking with a silent, incandescent rage. They had been rendered utterly, completely irrelevant. They weren't a team. They were spectators. "I gave you an order," Robin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Deku turned to face him. He retracted Black Whip, letting a spluttering, furious Gizmo drop to the floor with a thump. "Your order was to secure the server core and neutralize the HIV," Deku replied, his tone respectful but firm. "I have done so. The objective is complete." "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Robin exploded, finally losing his cool. He stormed forward, jabbing a finger into Deku's chest. "You went off on your own. You ignored the plan, you ignored my leadership, and you endangered the entire team by filling the building with that smoke." "No one was endangered," Deku said, his gaze unwavering. "The smoke gave me total control of the environment. I could see all of you. I knew where you were at all times. It was the most efficient way to achieve the objective with 0% risk of casualties. You don't get to decide what the risk is. I do. I'm the leader of this team, a leader who was wasting time." Izuku's voice rose for the first time, the frustration of the past few days finally bubbling to the surface. "Your plan was a delicate dance when what was needed was a hammer blow. Every second you spent infiltrating, Gizmo was seconds closer to controlling this city. I ended the threat before it could begin. Isn't that the goal? Isn't that what matters? What matters is trust," Robin yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "What matters is that we fight together, win or lose. We are a team, Deku. A family, and you just showed us you have no interest in being a part of it. You just want a battlefield to conquer on your own." The word family struck Izuku like a physical blow. He looked past Robin at the other Titans. He saw Cyborg, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable behind the glowing red eye. He saw Beast Boy looking at the ground, and Starfire wringing her hands, her face a mask of conflict and sadness. He saw Raven, watching him with those unnervingly perceptive eyes that saw too much. He had thought he was protecting them. By taking all the risk, by being the sole point of failure or success, he thought he was shielding them from harm, just as he had tried to shield his friends at UA. But looking at their faces, he saw he hadn't protected them. He had alienated them. He had pushed them away, made them feel useless, and broken the fragile trust they had offered him. Robin was right. He wasn't acting like part of a team. His solitary war had followed him to this new world, and his crusade was isolating him all over again. His shoulders slumped. The fire in his eyes dimmed. I'm sorry," he whispered, the words feeling inadequate. "I only wanted to ensure everyone was safe, by making sure we had nothing to do." Cyborg finally spoke, his voice heavy with a new kind of weariness. "Look, kid. What you can do, it's incredible. But we're not sidekicks. We're not a cheerleading squad. We're heroes too." The mission was a success, but the cost was devastating. They had defeated the HIV-5, but in doing so, Deku had shattered the delicate balance of the Teen Titans, leaving them victorious, and more broken than ever. He stood among them, a Titan in name, but an island in reality. Victory had never felt so much like defeat. The silence in Titan's tower was a physical presence, a heavy, smothering blanket woven from threads of resentment, confusion, and shock. The HIV-5 were incarcerated. The city's infrastructure was secure. By all metrics, it was a flawless win. Yet, the atmosphere in the common room was thick with the bitter taste of ash. Robin had sequestered himself in the evidence lab, poring over the data from the mission, his silence more accusatory than any shout. Starfire floated listlessly by the main window, her usual radiant glow dimmed, her gaze lost somewhere over the gray waters of the bay. Raven was a statue in her corner, meditating, though the faint tension in her shoulders suggested her mind was anything but calm. And then there was Izuku Midoriya. He sat on the edge of the sunken sofa, ramrod straight, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He had been offered a change of clothes, a simple gray sweatshirt and black cargo pants that felt impossibly soft, and foreign against his skin. His tattered costume lay in a heap in the infirmary, awaiting repairs he hadn't yet found the focus to attempt. He felt like a bug under glass, the focal point of attention he had created but did not fully understand. He had achieved the objective. He had kept everyone safe. Why did it feel like he had broken something irreparable? It was Beast Boy who finally snapped. He couldn't stand the quiet. He couldn't stand the gloom. He looked from his brooding friends to the statue-still boy on the couch, and his simple, good-natured heart decided on a course of action. This kid didn't just need a team. He needed to learn how to be a kid. He nudged Cyborg, who was on the opposite side of the couch, moodily polishing his sonic cannon with a microfiber cloth. "Psst, Cy," Beast Boy whispered. "What?" Cyborg grunted, not looking up. "Look at him." Beast Boy gestured with his head toward Deku. "He looks like he's waiting for a building to fall on him. He's wound up tighter than Robin's utility belt." Cyborg finally glanced over. He saw the rigid posture, the distant look in the boy's emerald eyes, the way his hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He saw a soldier on watch, not a teenager in a living room. A sigh, a mix of steam and air, escaped his internal systems. "Yeah, well, he's got a lot on his mind," Cyborg mumbled, a trace of the earlier resentment still in his tone. "Exactly. And we need to get it off his mind," Beast Boy insisted. "Operation Chill Pill is a go." Cyborg raised an eyebrow. "Operation what? We're gonna teach the new guy how to have fun," Beast Boy declared, standing up. "It's a Titan's duty to help a brother out." Before Cyborg could protest, Beast Boy was already in motion. He zipped over to Deku, a wide, slightly forced grin on his face. "Deku! My man! You're probably starving after all that, smashing and bashing. And I bet you've never had the greatest food in the universe." Izuku blinked, pulled from his reverie. He looked at Beast Boy's expectant face, confused. "The greatest food in the universe? Pizza!" Cyborg boomed, catching on and deciding to play along. He stood up, his massive frame eclipsing the light. "Beast Boy's right. A victory, even a weird one, calls for a victory meal. My treat. What do you like on your pizza, kid? Pepperoni? Sausage? Pineapple?" "Do not encourage him with the pineapple," Starfire murmured from the window, a flicker of her old self returning. Izuku just stared at them. Pizza. He'd seen it in pre-Quark-era movies. A flat, circular bread. A party food. The concept was so far removed from the high-energy nutrient paste and stale ration bars that had been his diet for months that his brain struggled to categorize it. "I do not have a preference," he said slowly. "Whatever is most efficient for nutritional intake is acceptable." Beast Boy and Cyborg exchanged a look. "Efficient? Whoa, hold up, Roboman," Beast Boy said, waving his hands. "Pizza isn't about efficiency. It's about joy. It's about glorious, greasy, cheesy happiness in a box. We're getting the meat lovers extravaganza. And one veggie for Raven," he added as an afterthought. An hour later, 4 large pizza boxes sat open on the low table in front of the couch. The aroma of baked dough, spicy pepperoni, and melted cheese filled the room, a scent so warm and comforting it felt like an intrusion. The other Titans had gathered, drawn by the smell and the tentative truce it offered. Izuku sat with a single slice on a plate in his lap. He watched how the others ate, mimicking their technique. He lifted the slice, folded it slightly as Cyborg did, and took a small, cautious bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. It was salty, savory, tangy, and rich all at once. It was complex and overwhelming. It was good. It was so good it made his heart ache. A sudden, sharp memory pierced through his combat-honed focus. His mother, Inko, smiling as she placed a steaming bowl of katsudon in front of him after a particularly hard day of training. A meal made with love, not for fuel. A lump formed in his throat. He swallowed the bite of pizza, but the joy of it was gone, replaced by a profound wave of homesickness. He mechanically continued to eat, his face a careful blank mask, treating the slice of pizza not as a pleasure, but as another objective to be completed. Cyborg, watching him, frowned. The kid wasn't enjoying it, he was dissecting it. "All right, food was phase 1. Beast Boy announced, wiping his hands and grabbing several game controllers. Phase 2, Digital Domination. You ever play Mega Monkeys in Space 4, Banana Blitz? He tossed the controller to Izuku, who caught it with reflexive speed. He looked down at the plastic object in his hands, at the buttons and joysticks. It was another alien artifact. It's a video game, Cyborg explained, settling onto the couch and picking up his own custom-built controller. We fight each other. For fun. Fight for fun? Izuku asked, the concept feeling absurd. Fighting was survival. Fighting was a grim necessity. Exactly! Loser buys the next pizza. Beast Boy cackled, turning into a green gorilla and expertly manipulating his controller with his oversized hands. The game flared to life on the massive screen. It was a chaotic, colorful fighting game with over-the-top characters and explosive special moves. Beast Boy and Cyborg were masters, their button mashing a symphony of friendly trash talk and virtual carnage. Oh, you're going down, Cy! In your dreams, grass stain! Feel the power of the sonic boom boom, Izuku watched. He didn't look at the flashing lights or the silly characters. He watched the inputs. He saw the patterns. He saw the timing for a block, the frames of animation for a special attack, the recovery time after a missed grapple. To him, it wasn't a game. It was a combat simulation with predictable, exploitable mechanics. Alright, new guy, you're up, Cyborg said, handing him the controller after soundly defeating Beast Boy. Don't worry, we'll go easy on ya. Izuku took the controller. He chose a character at random, a generic ninja type. Cyborg chose his favorite, a massive robot with rocket fists. The match began. Cyborg came out swinging, launching a flurry of flashy attacks. Izuku didn't respond. He just held block, his character standing perfectly still. He watched. He learned. Cyborg's attack pattern was aggressive but repetitive. He always followed a 3-hit combo with a chargeable rocket punch that left him vulnerable for 1.2 seconds. Come on, kid, you gotta fight back! Cyborg taunted good-naturedly. On Cyborg's next combo, right as the rocket punch was launched, Izuku acted. He didn't do anything flashy. He sidestepped, and in the 1.2-second window of vulnerability, executed a simple, unblockable 3-hit jab combo he'd seen in the game's move list. It did minimal damage, but it was perfect. The match continued in this way. Cyborg would attack, Izuku would defend, analyze, and then execute a single, flawless, optimal counterattack. There was no wasted motion. No taunting. No excitement. It was the digital equivalent of his takedown of the HIV. 5. Brutally efficient. The health bars dwindled. Cyborg, growing frustrated, unleashed his character's ultimate move, a massive screen-filling laser beam. Izuku, having anticipated the energy build-up, simply jumped. The beam passed harmlessly underneath him. As he landed, he executed one final, precise combo. KO! The game announced. Silence. Beast Boy and Cyborg stared at the screen, then at Deku. Dude, how did you do that? Beast Boy asked, his jaw slack. Izuku looked down at the controller, a flicker of something, not pride, but analytical satisfaction, in his eyes. His attack patterns were predictable. After observing them, the optimal counter-strategy became clear. The objective was to win. He handed the controller back to Cyborg. The air, which had been light and fun just moments before, was once again heavy. He hadn't played a game with them. He had defeated an opponent. He had proven his superiority in yet another arena, and in doing so, had pushed them even further away. I need some air, Izuku said quietly, standing up. Thank you for the food. He walked away, leaving the two fun-loving titans sitting amidst pizza boxes and game controllers, feeling more defeated than if they had lost to a real villain. Their well-intentioned mission had been a catastrophic failure. They had tried to show him their world, but he was still trapped in his own. The roof of Titan's tower was a sanctuary of solitude. The wind was a cold, clean thing up here, whipping around the massive T of the building, carrying the distant sounds of the city with it. It smelled of ozone and the coming night. Izuku stood at the very edge, the toes of his borrowed boots right on the precipice. He wasn't looking down at the dizzying drop. He was looking east. He knew, logically, that it was just an endless expanse of ocean. But in his mind's eye, he was trying to see through the curvature of the earth, past the horizon, to the home he had been torn from. Were they okay? Was All Might still holding on? Were Uraraka and Ida and Todoroki safe? Was All for One running rampant in his absence? The not knowing was a poison, a slow-acting acid eating away at his insides. He was a shield, forged to protect his world, and now he was light years away, useless. It is a beautiful view, is it not? The voice was soft, startling him from his dark thoughts. He turned to see Starfire floating a few feet away, her crimson hair a vibrant slash of color against the bruised twilight sky. She wasn't looking at the city. She was looking at him, her green eyes full of a gentle, sorrowful light. Yes, he answered, turning back to the view. It is. She drifted closer, settling onto the ledge beside him, her feet dangling over the edge. For a long time, they sat in a comfortable silence, two beings of immense power, united by their shared otherness. This city, she said finally, her gaze sweeping over the glittering lights. When I first arrived on this planet, it was so loud, so frightening. The smells were strange, the foods were baffling, the customs made no sense. I was a stranger, hunted and alone. Izuku listened, his own loneliness echoing in her words. I was a princess on my home world, Tamarin, she continued, a wistful note in her voice. But I was forced to flee. Betrayed by my own sister. I came to Earth not as a visitor, but as a refugee. I did not know your language. I did not understand your ways. Like you, the first humans I met I fought. She glanced at him, a small, sad smile on her lips. And like you, I possessed a power they did not understand and could not match. They feared me. This time, Izuku turned to look at her fully. He saw the flicker of old pain in her eyes, a pain he recognized. The fear of the unknown. The isolation that comes from being too powerful. What happened? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I met them, she said, a genuine warmth flooding her voice as she gestured vaguely back toward the tower below them. I met Robin. And Cyborg, and Raven, and Beast Boy. They did not see a monster or a weapon. They saw someone who was lost and scared. Robin, he offered me a kindness I did not believe I deserved. He offered me a home. They all did. She met Izuku's gaze, her own eyes glowing with earnest sincerity. I know what it is to feel the weight of a world on your shoulders. I know what it is to be strong, and for that strength to make you feel utterly alone. But here, with them, I learned that a heavy burden is made lighter when it is shared. You do not have to carry your world by yourself, Izuku Midoriya. Her words were a soothing balm on a raw, open wound. He had spent so long building walls, convincing himself that his isolation was a necessary sacrifice to protect others. The idea that it wasn't a sacrifice, but a self-inflicted wound, was staggering. My power, it is dangerous, he said, looking down at his scarred hands, the conduits of a force that could level cities. When I am near people, they become targets. The ones I fight, the one I was fighting, they are drawn to me. Being alone is how I keep others safe. It was the core of his belief, the mantra that had driven him into the shadows. Is it? Starfire asked gently. Or is it simply how you keep yourself from being hurt again? We are stronger together, Deku. Not just in power, but here. She touched her chest, right over her heart. Cyborg's logic, Beast Boy's joy, Raven's calm, Robin's strategy, they all make my strength more than just force. They make it purposeful. They make me better. She stood up, her form silhouetted against the last vestiges of sunlight. You have a home here, if you will allow yourself to accept it. You do not have to be a soldier standing watch. You can be a part of our family. She gave him one last, hopeful smile before drifting back down into the tower, leaving him alone with her words and the rising moon. Family. The word felt like a half-forgotten dream. For the first time in a long time, a crack appeared in the fortress of his solitude. A tiny, fragile sliver of light shone through. The psychic noise was unbearable. Raven sat cross-legged on the floor of her darkened room, surrounded by her books and artifacts. She was trying to meditate, to find her center, to push away the chaotic emotions of the day, but it was impossible. A new frequency had been introduced to the tower, a constant, turbulent broadcast of emotional energy that she couldn't tune out. It was Deku. It wasn't just his own emotions, the deep well of grief, the sharp spikes of guilt, the crushing weight of responsibility. That alone would have been a storm, but there was something else, something layered beneath it. It was the hum. The static. The whispers she had felt when she first touched his mind. After his conversation with Starfire, the noise had intensified. His hope was a sharp, piercing note. His doubt was a low, rumbling bass. The conflict inside him was a psychic symphony of chaos, and it was giving her a migraine. She couldn't block it out. So, she decided to lean into it. Taking a deep breath, she murmured her mantra. Azarath, Metrian, Zinthos, her own consciousness detached from her physical form. Her soul self, a raven of pure shadow, emerged from her body and flew from her room. It passed through the walls of the tower, a ghost in the machine, drawn irresistibly toward the source of the disturbance. She found him in his assigned room. It was as sparse and impersonal as a monk's cell. He wasn't sleeping. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at the pieces of his battered costume. He was trying to stitch a tear in the green fabric, but his hands were trembling slightly. He looked lost. Raven's soul self solidified, her spectral form hovering in the corner of the room. He couldn't see her, but she could see him, and more importantly, she could feel him. She closed her astral eyes and focused, pushing past his surface emotions, diving deeper into the strange energy that defined him. She followed the green lightning, tracing it back to its source, and then she was adrift in an ocean. It was a vast, dark space within his soul, lit by a swirling nebula of emerald energy. And in that space, floating like constellations, were them. The ghosts. They were not clear figures, not to her. Her empathy translated them into pure sensation. She felt a presence that was fierce, protective, and sharp-edged, like jagged glass, a woman with a fiery will and a floating mane of hair. 7th, a whisper in the void. She felt another, a presence of profound calm and stoicism, a feeling of absolute control and lethal precision. It felt ancient, patient, like a coiled snake. 6th, another was a burning core of pure, righteous anger and determination, a blazing star of resolve. 5th, and another, a shadowy figure radiating an aura of immense pain and weary resignation, a man who had carried his burden for too long in the darkness. 4th, there were 3 others, fainter, their wills more distant but still present, a foundation upon which the others were built. 7 distinct souls, 7 lifetimes of experience and power, all channeled into the young, trembling boy sitting in the room. They weren't just memories. They were active participants, a silent council observing the world through his eyes. They sensed her presence. The nebula of green energy swirled, the whispers growing louder. A wave of immense power, a feeling of generational duty and unimaginable sacrifice, washed over her. It was not hostile, but it was overwhelming. This was one for all. Not just a quirk, but a living legacy. A torch passed through the darkness, and this boy was its newest, brightest, and most burden-bearer. Raven pulled back, her soul self snapping back to her physical body with a gasp. She was back in her room, her heart pounding. Her gem was cold. She finally understood. He wasn't just strong. He was a vessel. He contained multitudes. The weight he carried wasn't just metaphorical, it was literal. He carried the souls and hopes of 7 heroes inside him. His belief that he had to be alone, that he had to carry this burden by himself, was not just a trauma response. It was because, in a way, he had never been alone. He had this silent, powerful audience with him at all times. How could he explain that to anyone? How could he ask for help when his secret was so immense, so impossible? She stood up. She had to tell him. Not everything she saw. Just the one thing he needed to hear. She didn't knock. The door to his room slid open with a soft hiss, and she was just there. Izuka looked up, startled, dropping the needle and thread. Raven stood in the doorway, her hood pulled low, her face cast in shadow. The others tried to understand your strength, she said, her voice its usual low monotone, yet it filled the small room. Cyborg analyzes the energy. Robin fears the lack of control. Starfire feels the pain it causes you. She took a step inside. They are all wrong. Izuku stared at her, confused and wary. Wrong? They see your power as a tool, or a weapon, or a curse. She continued, her violet eyes seeming to glow in the dim light. They don't understand what it is. I do. She stopped in the center of the room. You're never alone in a quiet room, are you? There are always voices. Whispers. A static at the edge of your hearing. A feeling of being watched, not by an enemy, but by an audience. Izuku's blood ran cold. His breath hitched. It was the most accurate description of his life with the vestiges that he had ever heard. You think it's a haunting, Raven said, and her voice was not just stating a fact, but correcting a fundamental misconception. You feel the weight of their lives, their deaths, their unfinished battles. You see them as ghosts, and you carry them like a chain. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not a strange, gloomy girl, but someone with an ancient, profound understanding of the burdens of the soul. You are not haunted, Izuku Midoriya. She let the words hang in the air, a stark, revolutionary statement. You are accompanied. With that, she turned and walked out, the door hissing shut behind her, plunging the room back into silence. Izuku sat frozen, his mind shattered. Accompanied. Not ghosts. Not a burden. Not a chain. A council. An audience. Companions. He thought of the fourth, who had given him danger sense. He thought of Nana Shimura, who had lent him float. He thought of the others, their power thrumming within him. There was a constant presence. He had seen them as his responsibility, his grim inheritance. He had never once considered them his companions on this lonely road. For the first time since crashing into this strange new world, he didn't feel the crushing weight of being a hero. He felt the barest, most fragile glimmer of what it might be like to not be entirely, completely alone. And that single, terrifying, wonderful thought changed everything.